So I'm going to give this a few minutes for folks to trickle in. If everyone could please remain on muted, I'd appreciate that.
Stephen, I'm going to make you a co-host. Oh, sorry about that. So you put the agenda up, please, because I don't have it. Thank you.
Jason, you're on. Can't hear you.
I understand you can't hear me. I'm talking to Patty.
Okay, apologies.
Yeah, we're having technical
Okay.
problems.
Morning, Jason.
Good morning, Carrie.
How have you been?
We're doing all right. We're hanging in there. How about yourself?
It's that time of the season, and apparently the fuel cost has shut down about four different operators. So now I'm booked out until the end of July, working nearly every day of my life.
So it sounds fun.
Yeah, 6 to 7 days a week, but it's good for a retiree, right?
But you just got to start working 8 days a week.
I've been trying to invent the 8 day week, and I think about a 30-hour work day would be better for me.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Find some time to sleep in there too.
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
All right, so it's almost 8:35. Start this meeting up. Thanks everybody for being here. Few housekeeping notes. So public. So anyway, as you'll notice, there's a lot of folks on this meeting right now, and there's been a lot of interest in what the TAC is up to, what we're doing. I sent a letter, email, what have you, to the TAC about 3 weeks ago, discussing some of the work that we've been doing with water board staff and meeting with their legal counsel regarding the application potentially of the Bagley-Keene Act. This meeting and this board, we're not a board. This group is not subject to the Bagley-Keene Act. So thank goodness. If we were, this would be an unworkable arrangement. But because of public interest in what we're doing, what we're doing here is we're recording the meeting today, and we're going to make that meeting publicly available on our website, sort of after the fact. This is not a public meeting. There will not be a public comment period. So we will continue with our business, but it is available for folks to view. We at the RCD do not have the version of Zoom that would allow us to create classes of participants. So we're going to go on the honor system here, that if you're not a member of the TAC, please refrain from jumping into discussion. We don't have a way of controlling who's able to speak and who is not able to speak. So just to keep this meeting on track and in time, I just wanted to make that prefaced. I'm sure as people trickle in and don't hear this information, it might come up as an issue during the meeting, but I just wanted to let you all know that that's where we're at right now. So a few things, and I did send that that letter out to TAC members here about discussions of our contract changes with the water board, trying to clarify some of the information and the purpose of the TAC related to the document that was sent out. The big change to keep in mind right now is that we've changed the deadline for the final documents to June 8th. That'll give us a week before our contractual deadline of June 15th. So that includes both the framework assessment report and road methodology report. So that's a lot of things that are all due at one time, but thankfully we've had discussion with the water board about what end product they're hoping for. And we've had some discussions about the particularly framework for how we're going to rank and prioritize work conducted under the assessment program. And their direction, I believe, and we'll keep this open to comment for, sort of falls actually more in line with what the TAC has been recommending in the past, where we're going to try and look at sub-watershed level for prioritization of roads rather than actual road segments. Originally, we were thinking, we RCD staff were thinking that we would split up all the known roads into road segments and prioritize individual road segments. We've worked with the water board, and the direction at this point is to be thinking more about characteristics of a sub-watershed that might prioritize one sub-watershed for assessment over another sub-watershed for assessment. I've also had a chance to, just for TAC members to know, it sounds like the budgets that are available, we're forecasting that most of the roads, if we're talking about smaller, like excluding basically the top 10 landowners, we should have enough money to assess just about every road in the watershed. So part of that will come into play in terms of how we're determining where we go. But it is a considerable amount of money that's been set aside for road assessments. So that's positive. Purpose of the TAC, I sent out a document 3 weeks ago and then abruptly decided to go to Yosemite. So if anyone has any questions about what was contained in that document, feel free to give you a minute to unmute yourself and ask if there's any pressing issues. I'm not seeing anybody unmuting. Dana?
Sorry, I was looking for my raise hand and button. I can't find it. So
Yep.
can you clarify the comment you just made about the funding? And I think I heard you say, forgive me if I'm putting words back in your mouth, but I thought I heard you say something about you feel like with the funding that you have for the assessments, you have enough aside from the 10 largest landowners. So
yeah, and I threw out 10 because
a little more, because it sounds as though that statement, though you may not have meant it, sounds as though they're not eligible for it.
That is not true.
That's what I just said. That's
Yep.
what I just said. I just want to make sure we clarify, because walking away from this, if I didn't ask the question, I could have interpreted that way. So I'm wanting you to just clarify that
Yep.
statement to kind of put it in perspective.
Appreciate that. Thanks for that clarification. No, there's no one in the watershed that is excluded from the project. However, in our ranking for who we might choose to work with over who we might not, one of the things that I could envision is there an existing assessment on the property or on a road system or something like that, in which case we probably would not want to reassess roads. So those top 10 landowners are more likely, I would assume, to have an existing road assessment. And so I'm not saying that every single road in the entire watershed will be able to be covered. And I am kind of recounting a conversation that I had 2 weeks ago. So I couldn't tell you whether it was the top 4 or the top 10, but I'm safe in knowing that the top 10 landowners, excluding the mileage of roads that we anticipate are on those properties, we have enough money if everyone else in the watershed just said, come on in, we'd love to have an assessment. We actually have a considerable amount of funds to do road assessments. And what I was told is that we believe that we have enough funding that if that were the case, we would be able to do a road assessment on all of the small properties. But that doesn't mean that a large property can't apply, or that we might not be doing assessments on large properties, or helping to fill the gaps of large properties. Say they do have road assessments, but there are areas of their property that have not been prioritized or assessed. It's going to be a voluntary program where if someone were to say, hey, I would love to have your staff come out and do an assessment, it's available to everybody, but we'll be ranking like the applicants essentially based on the prioritization, which Colin's going to talk a bit more about the work that we've been doing, looking at that sub-watershed level of particular characteristics that would rank one property over another. Say we were in a competing funding situation, or we were running low on funds. So, does that make sense?
It does. And first, I want to say I'm very happy that now we're looking at sub-watersheds and we're kind of honing in that way instead of just making this a big sweep. And I think it obviously will make the funding be more effective. But I just wanted to make sure that we clarified what you meant. I think I knew what you meant, but words matter and things move on from here. So I just wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity to ensure that what you meant was clarified. Thank you.
I very much appreciate that. So thank you for clarifying. So
Jason, excuse me
my
for
intro.
interrupting. I'm sorry for interrupting. Laura Baker, Friends of Gualala River. Before that, you scoot away from the topic of the purpose of the TAC, I wonder if there can be, if that's a paper, if you can give us a link to that so that we can take a look at that, or however might be the easiest and most time effective.
I'm not going to be able to make a promise. I'll check in with the water board outside of this meeting and see what information we want to make public or not. So at the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that this meeting is not subject to Bagley-Keene. And so there are certain rules that are associated with that act. But what we are doing is we're recording this, and we'll make this recording available to the public. So we also do not have the ability to mute everybody or keep them on mute. So we're just kindly requesting that if you're not a member of the TAC, that we hold comments. You are free to send any comments that you have to, you can email me, you can email, well, I'm just going to throw Randy out there because I'm looking at him. You can email Randy, get any comments that you have. If you see something on here, or if there are questions that come up, feel free to reach out to us in that way. But we're going to try to keep this meeting to the allocated time, and there's a good amount on the agenda. So, speaking of the agenda, if I can find it, it's in the chat. Thank goodness, because I had it up. That was sort of the TAC and tasks overview. Are there any questions about that? Mark, you have a look like you want to say something.
Many things. I was just wondering if any progress has been made on sort of figuring out how to identify lands currently enrolled under GWDR so that it's not on the landowner to demonstrate what they've already submitted to water quality.
I don't know. I haven't heard anything to that effect, but thankfully we're working on getting this whole process more focused on where are we providing free assessments. So that might be just a question that we would have for a landowner, is if they already have that information. There's going to be a separate process that will be developed. And part of why I've been really advocating, working hard to do as much as I can to separate out like our program from whatever else is happening in the watershed, is because the TMDL orders are not set in stone at this point, but my deliverables sure are. So, we need to be providing a program to provide technical, like road assessments, free to landowner road assessments by this season. And so that's the push, to have metrics by which we can adequately deliver public funds for the purpose of well, it's not an improvement, but for lack of a better word, private improvements, right?
So because this is part of the voluntary program, this isn't really the impetus of it. Fair enough for now.
Yeah, and the process through regulatory orders is going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take longer than us getting started on our regulatory or on our assessment program. So the more I can focus on our assessment program, the purpose of this TAC, zeroing in on how do we deliver, I can't remember the number, but I want to say it's somewhere in the range of $3.5 million in funding for the purpose of assessing roads in the watershed. That's why we need to have a framework. We need to have a non-biased way of choosing. If we were to come up against our funding limits, how do we pick which landowners would receive services or which areas would receive services? And that's where I had originally thought we were going to go road by road, and now we're looking at sub-watersheds as being the way of doing this. And that, to my knowledge, is further in line with actually the recommendations that were being made early on by the TAC, who were concerned about the road by road methods. Anna,
yes,
you're
I think
unmuted.
that's great. I appreciate this new direction. I think it makes more sense. So I'm excited to move forward with that.
Yeah, and it should be more feasible. Like, we were going to have to do a lot of work to go road by road. So with the timeline being basically a month, a little less than a month that we have to have all of this together, I think it's feasible if we're just looking at ranking sub-watersheds. Be a lot harder to go road by road, name every one of those roads, run it through our characteristics that we had identified. But we did use the characteristics that we had talked about before as our basis. I'm going to hand this to Colin, who's been working on our sort of new framework and like using the information that had been previously discussed with the TAC. And so he's got some some GIS information, a few examples of what it's looking like to be able to share with you guys. And then pending any other inputs that maybe we didn't consider, that will become the established framework by which we'll look at every subwatershed and we will be ranking, as an example, the wheat field fork will rank higher than, I don't know. I shouldn't have even brought this up. South Fork. I don't. And that's not true. I don't actually know.
Planning watershed. There you go.
Yeah. So I wish I had a big planning watershed map in front of me right now, but I don't. So
we'll get into the maps shortly here. So
take it away.
Okay, so thank you. And yeah, as Jason said, I'm going to go over some of our preliminary results for the kind of watershed approach to the prioritization. And what I wanted to start with first is just a kind of explanation. Let's see, share. Can you all see this? This is a table here of each of the metrics that were included in the watershed analysis. So this is similar to the document we went over in our last TAC meeting, except in that document we had probably, I don't know, it was maybe 15 different metrics. And this one is boiled down to 6, although the Russell analysis has several of those other metrics kind of embedded in it. So I'll just go through these one by one, kind of, this is a quick overview. So coho habitat length. So this is, again, kind of on a per subwatershed basis. So this is length of stream that has potential coho habitat. And for that, we used the intrinsic potential model. And that one, so I guess let me start even higher. So there's a metric, which is, something like coho habitat length or, kind of erosion potential. And then that metric, there's also a weight associated with that metric. So the metrics capture the spatial distribution across the watershed. So, one subwatershed will have more coho habitat, one will have less. And then the weights capture the kind of relative importance across different metrics. So those are the two, one on the left is the kind of spatial importance, and then the weighting is the, within metrics importance. So again, length of coho habitat, and that's from the IP model. The next one is, this is the revised universal soil loss equation that was recommended in the last TAC meeting. And that one includes rainfall, soil erodibility, slope length and steepness, vegetation cover, and land use. The next one down is steelhead habitat length, which is from the steelhead IP model. The next one is landslide potential, which is from the California Geologic Survey map of the Gualala watershed. The next one is acres burned, and for this one we used a threshold of 10 years. So thinking, that fires that had happened in the 1940s don't really have impact on the kind of erosion potential today. So 10 years was our cutoff. And then the last one is registered water diversions, which is one of our metrics was whether or not a subwatershed had drinking water uses, and kind of, there was a couple different data sets we looked at, and we ended up deciding that registered water diversions was kind of the best surrogate that kind of captures water usage broadly in a watershed, surface water usage. And then, so how does all that get summarized? So on the right is kind of the, English language version, and in the middle here is a little bit of math, but you don't have to focus too much on it. But, each of these is kind of, like cohabitat length is like 1,000 feet. Sorry, Jason, I see you got your hand up before you want to go for it?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to ask with the TAC here regarding the diversion question. I think that's a good way of getting your typical small landowner water use. But I'm wondering if there is a data set that we could look at for some of the big hitters, like where does Annapolis provide water to a subset of people? Like, is there a water district or Gualala itself? This came up originally because Anthony, with Cashayo Band of Pomo Indians, was concerned specifically about the reservation. And so I'm just wondering if there are like certain population centers that we might be able to specifically look at to add to that diversion weight, just to know that it's like, okay, there's 40 people or, whatever that live and receive water from this service, this particular service.
And I'll just chime in real quick and say we did find there are boundaries of water service areas. So kind of like polygons of where those water service areas are, but what that didn't have was the points of diversions or the sources of the water that serve those areas. So that's part of the reason why we went with diversions. But yeah, would love to hear it if somebody knows of a better data set out there. And Matt,
Your
hand
hands
up.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Just real quick on the diversions thing. I mean, the two in addition to the Kashaya water use, there's obviously Sea Ranch and then Gualala, which each have, respective points of diversion, which are pretty well known. So that should be pretty straightforward. But was really going to ask a question about the fire metric and acres burned in the last 10 years. This is a by sub watershed or sub basin thing. So I'm just wondering whether that acreage, without being normalized for the watershed area, makes sense as opposed to just the raw acreage. Perhaps a technical point, but just wanted to ask that one. Thanks.
It's a good point, and we did not normalize. So, like as a percent of watershed area burn, which I think would be a good change. And we'll see, like there's really only, I think there were 3 fire footprints going back as far as 2020, and then I think there was a 2013 before that. So there actually wasn't all that much area that burned, but yeah, that's a good comment. Yeah, I think Randy, were you next?
Yeah, just a couple questions and I'll so the first one is regarding the cohabitat length, and then how about the consideration of including steelhead also within that metric? And then the second question is regarding the Russell. Are you really talking about using the K value here or the Russell? Because the Russell's generating a sediment yield for a given area, but you wouldn't really be able to do that easily that I can see from a GIS perspective on a watershed basis. But the K value itself has already been generated through other means and would be easily obtainable value. So anyway, those are my 2 questions.
So the steelhead habitat, that's each one of those is coho is one metric and steelhead is a second metric. If that gets at what you're saying, and kind of the way I don't know, we're thinking about how to incorporate both of those is by, that's coho would have a higher weighting between those two, but both of those are included. And then we did calculate kind of based on some of the material that Vijol had sent in the last TAC. There's some methods to calculate the Russell values on a watershed basis, and soil erodibility is one of the inputs to that, but there are several others, and this might make more sense once we flip over to the maps. So we'll show some results here in a minute. But Mark, I think you were next.
Yeah, I was just back to the fire. I guess my question is it a metric we really sort of want to consider under this analysis? Because as it currently stands, basically the only large fire that I'm aware of is a little bit of the wall bridge, which was mostly burning in oak woodland in that part of the watershed, which presumably has recovered for the most part from a sediment standpoint much more rapidly than forest land. So just sort of as this is a point in time analysis, is that really a metric that we should consider?
It's a good question, and maybe let's revisit once we flip over to the maps, because you're right that that's really the only significant fire. There's a couple, I think there's two other little spot fires, but you're right that there's really not much in terms of fire activity in the last 10 years.
I can't find my hand raise button, but as the wildfire guy here, I'd say you're exactly right. The fire intensities of the wall bridge in that area was not enough that you would create any sort of erosion control issues. But the one looking at this is looking at prescribed fires in the areas, but normally those intensities are also low intensity fires as well. So I think from the fire side of it, I think we could probably just scrap that whole thing at this point just to make it quicker. Sorry to cut you there, Vishal.
Yeah, let's go Vishal, and then I'd like to see the maps from Colin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm first of all, I just want to say that I appreciate that you put together these 6 metrics and capture quite a lot of what the TAC has been, the feedback we've been giving and discussing with you. So I'm really happy to see them. And just a quick point on the diversions, maybe for points of diversion, you've looked at the new Eden's version, which is called CalWaters, which is a more GIS friendly one. I'm assuming that you looked at that.
Yeah, I think that's where we downloaded the
okay.
points of diversion from.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, like I guess just kind of last point on this, the lower part here is we normalized each metric 0 to 1 and then multiplied by the weight, summed it all up, and that's what a sub-basin score is. So it could be up to 16 points if it scored a perfect 1 or kind of was the highest in the metric category and the highest in the weight category. So okay, let me flip over to the maps. So I will start with the 6 score inputs. So I'll just kind of flip through these one by one. So these are the points of diversion that were captured. Oh, and these red basins, these are the Cal water subbasins. And next, so this is the Coho IP model, which, again, this is kind of modeled Coho potential habitat. This adds in the potential steelhead habitat. So you can see there's kind of purple ends on top of the blue line. So basically the steelhead habitat is the Coho plus a little bit more. This is the fires layer. So you can see there's kind of just this one little corner, and then there's a couple other real small spot fires, but as we talked about, it doesn't really add there's not a ton of burn area. And then here, so this is the Russell results. This is summarized at the sub-basin level. I've also got another layer of it on the 10 meter pixel basis, so we can look at that too. And then this is the landslide potential map from the California Geologic Survey. And so all those get summed up, and then here, so this is the score. I'll just turn on the legend. So it's kind of 2.5 to 12 are the different basins, or are the different, total basin scores. And then I just highlighted the top 5. So I can make this a little bit smaller, but Britton Creek, Wolf Creek, Billings Creek, Upper South Fork, and Robinson. So these are the kind of top 5 highlighted here.
That's pretty cool.
Those are the
It's really
top
nice to see
priorities. Priority subwatersheds.
Yes. So I think the idea would be if there's a landowner open to having their roads assessed in one of these, top 5 watersheds, that's kind of where that we would go down, based on these results. So, I think the top watershed is here and the second is here and so on and so forth. Yeah, Matt, so you've got a question.
I'm sorry, I looked down and you went through those maps pretty fast. Could you go back
Yeah,
to
sorry.
the Russell map?
Yeah. Do you want it on the sub-basin? Well, here, I'll just flip back.
Yeah, I just didn't get a sense. And so the color ramp, I presume, what's the highest? Yeah.
Yeah, so these are, it's kind of like 2 to 5, and it's
I just work on all.
and so yellow and orange are bad, and the bluer and purpler ones are less bad.
Yes, higher values are the yellows, and the lower values are the blues.
So that yellow one is the one with the fire, and it's the only one that would be affected by that fire. So if that's relevant, you may be able to see by clicking on and off that input and kind of determine whether it's necessary or not. But it kind of doesn't hurt to have it in there because it shows the robustness of your analysis.
Thanks.
Yeah, I believe you're right that that fire is just kind of right at that top end. Yeah, Jason.
I just wanted to mention, I was looking at that area the other day with air photo, and I think that the top of both of those sub watersheds are affected by the cedars. And I don't know whether or not that's something that that matters, right? Like you have poor soils, and so you have the kinds of conditions that would then trigger, I'm assuming, in that Russell. So I don't know if we care about that.
Cedar has those high phenolitic plant compounds, so it has a higher hydrophobicity potential, and it is also associated with the serpentine soils, I believe. I don't know about that watershed, but in other watersheds it is. And I do think that those have a higher runoff and landslide and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, high risk area right where that fire was.
So smell
Which
test.
leads me towards suggesting leaving it.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to
think
throw
it's
that out
useful.
there. Yep.
Yeah, and I think so we were looking at that a little bit and trying to kind of think about what metrics kind of made these areas score higher, and you can see there's kind of something going on I think in the geology there, and then the vegetation cover, which is driven by the NDVI. There is kind of a lower spot here and some interesting kind of bare earth kind of right on this bridge and all that. So yeah, Stephen.
Hi guys, my name's Steven. I'm new with the Soma RCD, but been helping out on this a little bit. Colin, would you mind muting your? Thank you. Can you go back to the table, Colin, real quick? The descriptions of how we scored. No, the Word doc thing at the beginning. This, yeah. So thank you guys for the input on the fire criteria. I just want to flag that, like, if there's any metrics that we want to add to this analysis, we still have time. But also, I just want to flag the weight scores that Colin went over, like, and getting feedback on whether these weights are appropriate, the way that we laid them out, if we want to change these around in some way. So that's also feedback that we're looking from the TAC, is if we're missing something and whether or not the weights are appropriate for how we're ranking these metrics for importance in the watershed. So just want to flag that before we get too far ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Stephen. And I think that my mind is, even looking at the Wesley map, is going towards, this group together collectively. Do some of these maps make sense from, the experience of the watershed, from our own experience pulled together? Like if we were to bookend that yellow polygon versus, say, the purple polygon, does it actually just make sense, like a reality check or a sanity check? So in that same vein, I feel like, Stephen, when you say, do these weights make sense? I think if we were to see it implemented in one place, or if you have an example of it, then we could look at it and see if it actually makes sense from our experience in terms of how it's working out in terms of the numbers.
Well, that's where the maps where he showed the aggregate scores would come in. And so that would be showing like which subwatersheds are ranked highly. And the other thing I'll just mention is, like, Colin, if you can go back to the GIS map real quick. Sorry, I have you flipping around. We've also been discussing, like, and can you go to the aggregate score? When you look at how these watersheds are being ranked, like that one off to the right with the fire, but then you see like the one right above it is also like ranked highly. And so, like, instead of just looking at the sub watersheds in isolation of like aggregate score, we can also look at how, if a watershed scoring really high and the one next to it is also scoring really high, like, as the water moves through those watersheds, we can prioritize those like together. And so, like, that bottom right quadrant where there's like three that are scoring highly, like, we can think about prioritizing those kind of three watersheds as a whole, because they're all going to be kind of feeding into each other collectively. So that's just another thought as well. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks. Since we're opening review on this, I was a little surprised. I'm sorry. I may have missed a meeting in the last couple of weeks. I've been away. But with respect to the intrinsic potential mapping for Coho, I was a little curious about what IP algorithm was used for that, and I was just a little surprised that the Coho habitat potential extended so far upstream through so much of the watershed. It certainly is, at odds with the general experience I'm aware of in the watershed. And, who knows what the fish distribution may have been, 300 years ago. But, the existing, known occurrences of coho are much less frequent than that. And, the larger, like the Wheatfield Fork up in the headwaters of the Wheatfield Fork, hard to picture that being, equivalent coho habitat to like the North Fork, Gualala. So, and since that's got such a high weighting, I'm just kind of wondering if that's setting up a bias that may or may not be appropriate. So I'm just throwing that out for discussion, maybe. And I don't know if you looked at the NICWAP fish biology report and see what they had to say about coho distribution versus steelhead distribution.
That's a great point. I'm sorry to jump in, but one way to assess this framework and the weights is to switch out that coho map with a different one and see what you come up with. Like, for example, I don't know the report you're talking about, Matt, but there was that older NOAA report that think Linda had brought up last time, which had a map of the sub-watersheds where, like if you use that versus this IP model, what would you get in terms of this mapping? And that'll give you a sense of looking at the sensitivity of this framework.
So just so we know, the IP model is the one that NOAA generated for use in
It
the
is
recovery
okay.
planning. So it's the one that's in the whatever it is, kind of chapter 2 in those maps, which I believe is the same resource that Linda sent. So yeah, if
Thanks.
there's other coho distributions, and definitely recognize that this is not present day coho distribution. So understood, and that's definitely something we want to discuss in the TAC here is, should this be kind of modeled potential coho habitat or present day habitat, and how do we want to weight that?
Yeah, I think that eventually, in terms, again, sticking to this idea of looking at sensitivity of this model, I'm just calling this a model you've done. It might be good to just see, to bookend again, you have one kind of weights set up right now, but you could also just have maybe equal weights and just see what you get. It's just throwing it out there.
Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, in terms of the metrics used, the only thing I wanted to add for consideration was actual road densities. So, I mean, that information is readily available. It could be a relatively important factor, in determining, potential sediment production on a subwatershed level based upon, those road densities. So anyway, I just want to put that out there for discussion. I don't want to turn it into a big, long discussion here right now, because I know we have some other stuff to move through, but I just wanted to add that there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Randy. And I guess just to highlight and kind of make clear that in our original framework, we had road densities or road, like length of road that was within a certain distance of a stream, or we had some kind of road specific metrics and crossings, and but we took out both roads and crossings from this to focus more on kind of watershed wide geologic, kind of, I guess, metrics that would focus on what is the background erosion rates and the potential kind of ecology, rather than road specific metrics. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I'm happy to see the way you're weighting how you're weighting and seeing this by watershed. I think that's a really nice, really good change. And just to speak for a moment about the coho, and yes, it is, I think, historical. Those are historical numbers, but it was. I think what struck me, and I'll just say it one more time, that how it was known as a coho watershed is now steelhead. So the changes, and there could be other things going on, but if it's the sediment and the habitat that's been changed from the legacy land uses, I think it's whether, and I agree, maybe weighting those scores equally, it would be fine in this watershed, but I'm happy to see coho being considered, because I think it is, I think we actually should be looking to coho. This watershed was coho. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't want to be turned back to more coho in the future, with some addressing some of these issues. I think they would come.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that coho was detected in the watershed for the first time in 25 years this last season. So the possibility there for restoration hopefully is real. And I just wanted to throw out also, I know Anthony's not here right now, but I think that this particular discussion is a good place to invite Anthony with Kashaya Pomo again. I don't know if they were so willing to like tell us directly where there may have been historic fishing and um, foraging type areas. But I think if we were able to just show the map and see if he has any input, might be a good way to continue to include them in the conversation.
So on the coho, I'm wondering if it would be too complicated to break out existing coho and historic coho, like maybe one of them has a weight of 3 and one of them has a weight of 2 that still add up to the total 5. And then because it makes sense to me to keep the coho alive that are there now. And like that might want to happen, those roads might want to happen sooner. Um, but I also don't think we want to stop focusing on all koha habitat. And then to switch back to this watershed with the fire, I keep going back and forth on this fire thing, whether to include it or not. But one thing is that, like you were mentioning about how up where there's those red crisp marks near the fire and just near there's a lot of bare soil and stuff. Like maybe that bare soil doesn't have any roads in it, and so you might get like that might be like weighted super high, but it's really not a priority watershed. So I would just address that in your report when you discuss it, like maybe with this image with the fire and be like, I don't know. Or maybe you want to take the fire out for a weight and discuss that process, because it might have a much different weight based on something like, road density. I like the idea of bringing road density back into this as well. I don't think we need all those specific things like how many crossings or whatever, but I do think road density is relevant. And those are my thoughts. And I also, yeah, it really helps to spend some time with these maps. So I don't know if you're going to send them to us, but I'll probably have more comments if I like have a copy of them in my inbox that I can think about, or especially for pondering the different weighted things, because you gave us a list like a month or two ago of things to consider. And at that point, I did not have this information, so it wasn't enough information. And now that I've had this information, if I look at the old list, I might be able to give better feedback about like how things are weighted and which things are included. Thanks.
Just to add to that, the road density could come in as a second, second phase of. So you select the watersheds with this approach, and then you do a second level of selection based on the road density. That could be one way to do it. Instead of actually using the road density as a metric and weighting it right now, you could do it later as a second level.
About Russell, so I do like not just using the K value. I like the entire Russell equation included. I think it's more robust.
I'll just kind of turn on, let's see, something like the K value here real quick, or
Interesting.
Or the rainfall value. So, there are inside of the Russell, there's, the non-watershed metrics,
That's very useful.
which were then aggregated to the Russell score, which is here, this A, and then those were aggregated up to the mean within a subbasin, which is tons per acre per year. But again, I guess the units, I think, are less important than the spatial kind of distribution on it. But you can see there is something kind of going on in this corner, and I can just turn on that image. Oops. Zoom in on it. Let's see. This is kind of just outside of the basin, but there is kind of something going on in this area where there's a lot of exposed. I'm not sure if this is bedrock or exactly what.
That's the cedars.
Yeah. So there's something a little different going on in this corner.
Matt, your hand's up.
Yeah, Colin, while you're on that map, could you isolate the LS factor and zoom out and show us what that looks like?
Yeah.
That line below the Britton Creek there, I think, was a contingency line for the Wallbridge fire. Yeah, that right there.
Gotcha.
And in that actually kind of helps. I mean, with the prioritization of that fire, it might not be the fire effect that is your sediment impact. It might be the suppression
Yeah, you can see
work.
all those little
So
cross hatch marks, like on the vertical lines there, the one going on the top and the one going on the bottom. Those are down slopes there with big dozer water bars there. All those little scratch lines there. So that was definitely where the dozer took off there and then stopped and came back, obviously. But
so considering it's only in one area, and we can see that there was some suppression work done specifically in that sub watershed, maybe it's not the worst thing to have it with just one extra point.
yeah, I think that's worthy.
Well, I guess my question is, what about the other three or two fires in the watershed, the really minor ones? Are those also going to count for one? Because, like, I'm assuming that
Good catch.
fire a couple of years ago in Annapolis that was up in a vineyard in like 2 acres. Um,
Yeah.
like, should that count as 1 point for that?
So I guess the way it is working right now is it's the area burned normalized 0 to 1. So the big one is going to be a 1, and then these are going to be, a fraction of 1. But as Matt said, maybe it would be better to do it as a percent of the watershed that had burned. So, and then normalized. So anyway, it'll be some, fraction of 1.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it could be, like, I guess this one will add the big fire, or that corner of Walbridge, where that was, this will add 1 point to that score, and the others will add a fraction of a point out of that total of 16 possible points.
I just want to do a quick time check, and then Matt's got his hand up. There's about 20 minutes or so left in the meeting. And there is also the question of our evaluation methodology. So if we have time, it'd be nice to talk about some of that too. Matt.
And I guess maybe I should just jump in real quick before you, Matt. And we're working on the write-up of all the kind of technical, like exactly which inputs did we use for the LS and how did we calculate it, and we will share that, and are hoping to get some tech feedback on that. So
yeah, I don't think we need to talk about LS very much. I was just, it's sensitive to that at this sort of scale, the LS thing as a GIS exercise might or might not sort of be sensible based on what you see on the ground. And it looked like, from what I saw, it kind of over the whole space of the watershed doesn't look like it's very different from place to place. So I guess I'm not too concerned about that. So we can leave that topic, at least for now. Thanks.
And then, so I guess to also make sure what Stephen had mentioned is captured, is if there's any other kind of, major metrics missed or weights, that's something we'd love to get feedback on.
Well, that all sounds good. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. So we didn't look at land use. It could be particularly sensitive to that. I guess you'd have like what forestry, vineyard, and something else. I'm just kind of curious how you did that.
This one is an interesting one, where this was the prime farmland layer that was mentioned in the I think it's this P one that Vishal had and kind of it's either 0.7 or 1, I think, are the two numbers, but there is a notable break at the county line on this one, which is definitely not like that's not a real thing on the ground. That's just different inputs to this particular data set. So that is something we are aware of.
So that's the basis right now for what the P factor is.
That's the basis for the P factor, which is
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's 0 to 1, and I think the purple well, I'd have to look it up, but I think the purple is 0.7 and the pink is 1, or maybe vice versa.
Yeah. That doesn't seem, it doesn't look real good to me on that one. Might be difficult to, pull the, I'm not sure what you'd find for an available land use map. I mean, you could pull out the vineyard stuff pretty easy, and you could probably identify where commercial forestry goes on pretty easily. Maybe those would be the only things that would really matter, though, in terms of
Also,
really
how would you
calling out
weight
practice.
like what is the value of something that is commercial forestry versus the value of something that is rangeland or vineyard? Like what does that mean in terms of its applicability to erodibility?
Yeah, so this was it's all kind of originally calculated for farmlands, and so it's like prime farmland versus I forget what the other category is, and but in a forested landscape that I think has kind of less meaning. So yeah, maybe vineyard versus forest really we could simplify it down to two categories or something like that.
I think it can be simplified to vineyard and forest, but I do think it matters because you're going to have way more runoff on a vineyard than you're going to have in a forest land with a thick duff layer.
Yeah, agree with. And even just taking the maps off in the masks that you have on now, just to look behind, just for a moment, just to see the difference there.
Yeah. I think this is also getting at the fact that Ruzel is a little bit more of a finer scale tool. I mean, it's kind of a crude tool for forest land in general, and these kind of uplands. And you can generate an analysis that gives you a result, but how meaningful it is, I'm not so sure. I think Randy mentioned, well, maybe what if you just use erodibility, the erodibility factor, for example, might be a little more appropriate. I mean, we're only using it as sort of a general comparative metric to, just what's the erosion potential. And I'm not sure that the Russell approach at this scale with the information we're using is really generating a useful tool, but that might not be right.
I think that the soil erodibility is, of course, a very useful input. At the same time, if a relative estimate across the entire this Gualala River watershed of erosion amounts, even if, I mean, I know very well as a hydrologist that Russley has a lot of issues, but for the point of view of trying to compare one water sub-watershed against another, and using like the erosion potential in tons per unit area and whatever the units are, I feel has potential for being useful. And once again, we can also come up with a set of sensitivity experiments. What if we use soil erodibility instead of Russell, what would we get? I mean, would the prioritization of the subwatersheds, how much would it change? That might be a limited sensitivity exercise that can be done across several of the things that we brought up today.
So we have 15 minutes left. In that time, I'd like to pivot for 10 minutes to at least look at the evaluation methodology and start that conversation. I think that'd be really helpful for our team to move forward with that. And then I'd like to have 5 minutes to discuss next steps and how the TAC would like to be engaged, involved in, our moving forward here. So, Genevieve, are you able to bring that up?
For sure. Yeah, and I'll share my screen here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Genevieve Torino. I'm a forestry project manager here at the Sonoma RCD, and I've been assisting with some of this road methodology report development. And I guess rather than belaboring the process we went through, I'll just say that we're at the point where we think it probably is most appropriate to adopt the California Salmonid Stream Habitat Restoration Manual, specifically Chapter 10, which deals with upland erosion. I started to go through this document and adapt it to our particular project, just adding in some more information about the scope and purpose of these particular assessments, and maybe making some more adjustments and removing the extra or redundant information in there about just erosion processes and background. At this point, the feedback I'm hoping for is whether or not you think that this manual is the most appropriate for the work that we're doing and within the scope. And I've also heard concerns expressed that this report has a tendency to overestimate sediment delivery. And I was wondering if that was a major concern to the TAC, but also keeping in mind that this will not be used to penalize landowners. It's not going to be used for any sort of regulatory purpose, and instead hopes to just inform landowners as to what issues are occurring, what the severity is that, and how to remediate it. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I just want to say, or kind of reiterate, I mean, this methodology has been the standard of practice for a long time now. It's been applied across timberland landscapes, forested landscapes for, well over a decade and a half, over almost all Green Diamond's property, significant portion of other properties across the North Coast. It's a published and peer-reviewed methodology. And so, I mean, I would totally support this use. At this point, there's not time to essentially try to develop our own methodology for doing the work or try to reinvent the wheel. So, I mean, I'm in complete support of utilizing the methods that's already been kind of the standard of practice up and down the North Coast.
Great. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that feedback. And Jason, I saw your hand next.
The one thing I want to mention about this also is that we looked into the FRGP grant program. It's the Forest Watershed Restoration Program through CDFW, and they do specifically call out this method as the method that they would like to be used for grant applications. So I just wanted to throw that out as well.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah. And just to add to that, I know that for those grant applications, unfortunately, landowners cannot apply for compliance with the potential road order, but it still can be, considered as potential source of funding. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone's tried to, I mean, I know people have applied this in the field, but I'm also aware of the intensity of Green Diamond's road monitoring program with their habitat conservation plan. Sort of once you scale this out at the region-wide level, I have serious concerns about the intensity of this survey and the requirements associated with it. And as far as the feasibility of the RCD, or more importantly, once this goes region-wide and it's on the budget of private landowners to fund this, just sort of what the feasibility is and what, I guess just, yeah, time is money. So Just have we kind of run through some tests with that and what it's like to actually measure and get these measurements when you're fighting through 6 feet of blackberry.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important consideration that I hadn't thought about too much. But searching through this and looking at the data inventory forms and everything else required, I'd imagine it would take a substantial amount of time. And there was some discussion about allowing landowners to perform their own assessments, but according to this document, folks who are performing these should be, trained in the field in some regards, and there is talk of a CDFW specific training. So it probably wouldn't be appropriate to let the layperson just attempt this. And even as somebody as an RCD employee, I'm not sure that not without a hydrology, geology background, I would be completely adept at this, or at least would be intuitive to me. So I agree there. Yeah, and that's something we should definitely talk about. Carrie, I saw your hand next.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking that it'd probably be better if we used the handbook for forest, ranch, and rural roads because this can identify problems, but the people that are going to be on the ground fixing these, let's say the ranchers themselves, are going to be using this very guide and book to do it. And also, I don't have a degree in hydrology, but I've been managing our family's ranch rows over 3,500 acres for the past almost 40 years now. And this seems like the one that you're showing there seems a little broad, and it's talking about like up slope sources and that. And I think we really need to focus on the road issues themselves and stay hyper focused on that. But that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely understood. And I think the idea was to use the Rural Roads Handbook as a complementary resource to this methodology, seeing as that textbook doesn't really outline a specific methodology that could be used. But I do agree that it can help inform landowners and you know uh, develop treatments and maybe cost estimates too. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and Randy's got his hand up here after me, so I'm sure he'll be able to provide more information. But I believe that this is the methodology that is referenced in the Rural Roads Handbook. So it is in line with that Rural Roads Handbook. That said, some concerns that I have, you've already sort of talked about. We've talked about this program, the funds that are available to the program for the public, in addition to providing on the ground road assessments, to which I don't have an issue using this particular methodology. But one of the other things that we've talked about being able to provide are workshops for landowners to be able to do these assessments on their own property. And I'm concerned with the level of technical knowledge that one would need to do to put this sort of thing in place. And then the other thing that I've heard is that there was allegedly, I haven't been involved in it, so I'm curious to hear from folks who were, in the Garcia River, they used a streamlined road assessment methodology. And I haven't seen that methodology, understand what that is. I've just heard that it exists. And so if anyone has any feedback as to a program that worked well in the next watershed up, I would be really curious to see if that exists. So again, I don't really know, but I'm just throwing that out there. The last thing I'll say is that I would like this report under the purpose, if it doesn't already say it, to have some sort of clause in there stating basically that this isn't an endorsement for how all assessments need to be done forever. It's just that this is the method that we are choosing for the program that we are engaging in, utilizing, taxpayer funds. So to sort of address the question that Mark has come up with, because I don't know I don't know how this is going to apply to the entire North Coast, and I don't think that we need to think about how this is going to apply to the entire North Coast, because what I'm concerned about is how do I provide road assessments to landowners in this watershed using the funds that we have available. So I'm done.
Thanks, Jason. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well already been said, but the PWA handbook itself is really more focused on treatments and BMPs and doesn't really have an evaluation methodology. And actually, as has been stated, it's pretty much references this document as the evaluation methodology. And this document is focused on roads. It says upslope, but it's really the sites are focused on road related sediment delivery issues. So I mean, that's the way it's the document or the protocol has kind of been established. And then in terms of the region-wide discussion, we don't know what's going to happen there. It's likely that any future orders will have potential alternative methodologies allowable, at the discretion of the ability of the executive officer to approve those. But again, we're not talking about that today. We're talking about what's happening within the TAC here and approving a methodology that's going to be used for these Gualala funded assessments.
Thank you for those clarifications. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, just to add on here a little bit. So Mendocino RCD did a lot of work with NRCS in the Garcia and with Pacific Watershed Associates on printing the Rural Roads Handbook, as well as in the Navarro River watershed and other coastal watersheds in the Eel. One of the things I had just to say, I think it is going to be important to have a geologist write these reports and do some of these assessments if possible, or some kind of expertise to sign off on them. I have a hard time imagining landowners being able to do these assessments necessarily themselves. What we've done in the past is an important part when you get to implementation. Now, these road assessments are meant to be paid for. I mean, I guess it depends on the larger landowner. So let's just say that. So, but if these road assessments are being paid for and for the landowners, there shouldn't be necessarily a need for a landowner to do them themselves. And what we've done in other parts is done workshops to train operators so that the operators get trained on these best management practices, so that when they get implemented, the operators, we have a whole team of operators, and many of them are already trained in your region, I think, but just getting operators trained is really going to be important once the assessments are made.
Absolutely, and that's great feedback there. I see Matt next.
So, yeah, I mean, this is the Pacific Watershed Associates methodology. They've got a lot of staff who've worked on this, and the level of training that people have who apply this is, I'd say pretty extensive. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of you need to know a lot to do a good application of it, or you need some experience. Randy, I know you worked for PWA for a while and probably did some of this work. And I'm just looking for we've been talking about, well, it looks like there's enough money allocated to, do this kind of work. I'm wondering if we have the expertise in the committee to take a hard look at that and say, well, here's the money, here's what, what the costs of doing this kind of work are. Does it pencil out? I could imagine maybe streamlining the PWA manual here in some ways if it was getting too expensive. So I think maybe we need to look at this more closely. I've heard people say it looks like there's money available. Let's look at it a little more detail if we have time.
Yes, certainly. And that's something I'll flag for our team internally to take a look at as well, just to ensure that this does pencil out.
And I'll definitely be looking for some help from everybody on here. We've hired geologists, alluvial hydrologists, folks who can look at this and have a better opinion of it than our staff in particular. So very interested in obtaining some help from you guys. And so with that note, the wrap up, how best, I guess, should we be trying to address some of these questions? It seems like we've got a lot of feedback about the maps that Colin's going to be making. We can send out and continue doing sort of the shared doc Gmail email correspondence. Is there a feeling of a need to have another Zoom meeting like this to further hash this stuff out, or do we want to play it by ear, run with email for a little bit, and then decide whether or not once we see I'm just going to say a final product, but it's not final until it's approved by the water board, but final for us, run this thing back. Everybody have a chance to see it, make their last comments. Are there thoughts on anyone, strong opinions on how we want to move forward with both of these deliverables? Matt?
Seems like in the past, that it's been useful to do kind of an email chain to see who's going to pitch in and think about it. And then, and you guys get a chance to circle up again and think about how you can take these comments and what's going to be practical. And I think that'd be a good model to sort of have an email chain for a while and see if we get to the point where it makes sense to have another meeting of some kind, maybe a subgroup, a whole thing, something like that. Sounds good to me.
And that seems reasonable for both deliverables, thinking methodology and thinking mapping. Because that sounds good to me. So not hearing anyone. Okay, Vishal, there we go. Oh, you got to unmute.
Sorry about that. Could you remind us about the timeline again for this?
Everything is
output?
due to be done June 8th. So we have a month. Little less. Mark, you're unmuted.
I guess let's focus on the prioritization for now, but we really, as sort of the Farm Bureau representative, we really need to think on this, because the requirement to bring in CEGs outside of funding, A, there's not the availability of staff to do that, or consultants to do that. And B, I just cannot overemphasize the extreme costs incurred by that.
Yes, and I will reiterate that to my knowledge, how I understand this process, what we are deciding here does not affect the future order that will be required of landowners, because that's a sequel process that's going to have a public back and forth. What we're doing is we're focusing on how are we spending public dollars. But I still think it's really critical for us to think about, if this is something that needs an engineer, Sonoma RCD has one engineer on staff. We have a few other people who've done road assessments, not necessarily to this level, but that I think is a strong consideration. Like, how do we weigh what is the product that can get us? And I think that the deliverable that I would like to see is, I would like a product that can be used for a grant application in the future. So how many yards of sediment were being produced from a certain erosion control point or a certain feature, so that I can turn that around and in the future try to get funding. So that's my only requirement, but I would really like it to be something that doesn't require a stamp to be valid. And then that might be something that we could teach landowners. And so I don't know. I'm going to lean on this group of individuals and your expertise to figure out, how do we strike that balance? Is there a place that we can strike that balance? Or do we just have to go with, you got to be a certified engineer and here's your stamp, and that's what we do. I mean, people have had issues with liability and other stuff too. Anna?
Are you talking about doing the road assessments or finishing this report? And if we're talking about doing the road assessments, there's I believe a number of people qualified to do it. I do think having a professional do it is important. As a hydrologist, I'm trained to do it. I've done many. Foresters are often trained to do it. Geologists are trained to do it. Engineers are trained to do it. So I think that you do have a wider pool, but you do need a professional, somebody that knows how to do a road assessment and, calculate a fill prism and a cubic yards and what do you do, and how to fill out the forms and stuff. So I would cast a wide enough net that you have a bigger pool to choose from and can reduce the cost a bit, but still keep it professional.
I think that is a solid point, and I'm going to end on that. Sorry, Carrie. We are 5 minutes over. I do appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for sticking it out an extra 5 minutes. And Carrie, if you've got any comments, feel free to send it to, email folks. That goes for anybody. You all have everybody's emails. Hopefully, if you don't, email me and I will get you everybody's emails. But we'll continue there, and thanks again for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All right, take
Nice
care.
work. Thank you.